what's your title?
Vice President of Sports Marketing and Entertainment. So, but that's kind of that's what I tell people. I just use the word VP. It's simple. So what do? I'm just the vice president of a sports marketing firm because there's nothing that we don't do. I mean, right now before I came in here, I was sitting in the parking lot finalizing Kevin's foundation events.
Yes.
So I kind of work on that stuff too. So it's a little bit of everything.
That's what, when somebody asks me what I do for Dale, I'm like soup to nuts. I mean, I can be working on investments. I can order lunch. I can be negotiating a contract. I can be
babysit his kids.
Babysit the kids. I mean,
running
you name
the cars
it.
Tour.
Yeah, running the cars tour. I mean, you
100%.
name it. That's what we're doing, right?
100%.
So yeah. So KHI, number of employees, kind of the setup, because you just said it. I thought of a couple things. Relationships are one. That's what you do, right? But number two, you wear a lot of hats. You know, it's not like I know there's not this big vertical organization, and you wear a lot of hats, and so
there's five or six of us that we're small. We're a boutique agency.
Yeah.
We're not looking to be massive. Whenever we do land a home run with a client, whether it's a golfer or a UFC fighter against a big agency, it feels good because we're small. But that's what we are. We're small. We've got 7 or 8 NASCAR drivers, a couple UFC fighters, PGA golfers, but we basically put all our emphasis on making sure our sponsors are happy and our clients are happy. It doesn't matter if it's on the track or off the track. We want everybody to succeed. That's our goal.
yeah, absolutely.
You know, Kevin is one of the guys I think about and I often talk about when it comes to keeping sponsors, partners. We won't even call them sponsors, partners for a long period of time. We know that when Kevin came here to JRM, he brought some of his long partners with him. And when he left, they went with him. And if he jumps, he can go and do whatever. They will stick with him. And it's like, wait a second, that can't be luck. That's got to be something deep into the core. What is it, Josh? How does Kevin Harvick keep all those sponsors, and how does that carry over into what you guys have built in a company?
Kevin himself. I mean, he started this company, but the one thing about Kevin that you'll learn that, and you've known Kevin for a long time, you too, Kelley, it's like, it doesn't matter if he's mad, he's happy, he's being a parent. If somebody reaches out to him, whether it's work-related, client-related, customer, he will stop what he's doing and work on it. And in this case, he has a relationship with these sponsors. They're not just sponsors, they're friends. They text Kevin after races. Whether he wins or loses, they'll send him a text and Kevin responds back. He's that kind of driver, that kind of owner of his management company that he communicates with them directly. A lot of our guys in our sport that have done this for a long time, there's a middleman between the sponsor and the driver. But Kevin has never had that. It's always been, hey, Kevin, how's it going? Good. I actually just got off the phone with Hunt Brothers Pizza today, and they want to do this. Awesome. If they call Kevin, we're fine with that. That's a relationship that we have. Kevin has always been hands-on with our company. It doesn't matter what we're doing. I mean, he sits in our meetings. He gives us huge input, him and his wife, Delana. Delana sits in a lot of them, too, especially on the PR side. But they are hands-on, and you don't have that in a lot of places. A lot of these owners of these management companies, they're not hands-on. But he is 100% hands-on. We ask him, hey, have you ever heard of this race car driver? Hey, you ever thought about getting this golfer? And if he's about it, we're about it. So we're just one big family. And you got to look at the people that have worked for Kevin. Fred's going on, I think, 23 years.
Say who Fred is.
Fred Lexi's our president.
Okay.
Fred's basically the guy that keeps us out of trouble. He started a long time ago with Kenny Irwin. He did Greg Biffle stuff. He's been with Kevin forever, but he basically keeps Kevin and I straight. And when we have a question, we call him. And I love Fred, and he's been around with us forever. So Fred's our president, and then there's myself, and then there's Cindy. Cindy is our office manager, human resource manager. She's been there longer than me. I mean, I'm 20 years, so she's got to be 22, 23. Maybe even longer. And then Kelley's been with us. Kelley Kahn's been with us for almost 10 now. So our people are loyal. Our people are loyal. So Alicia worked with us a long time ago. She left for a couple years and she came back. So we're just one big family, whether it's our clients or our employees.
Has Kevin always been hands-on like that, like from the very beginning of his career to now, would you say? Because, I mean, I've seen drivers, Dale in particular, evolve and grow, right? So I'm just curious if Kevin...
I would say going back to our Shell days.
Yeah.
When he used to sit on those Shell calls with RCR, come up with ideas, way to do paint schemes, way to do marketing stuff and all that. So I would say it started then, and then you fast forward into 2012 when we closed the KHI doors. So the Harvicks could have a family, and we had the infrastructure already there with employees and the sponsors, and we just kind of rolled it over to a sports marketing firm. We still had the building, we had everything, so it was an easy transition. from one to the other. And it was just Kevin for basically about a year. And then when I just asked him one day about opening the doors and bringing more clients in, and then it just went boom.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Whose idea was it to go from race team? I understand why the race team closed. You said that so they could go build a family. But whose idea was it to go do sports marketing?
Cowboy Cerrone, our UFC fighter.
Okay.
Texas Motor Speedway 2012. He came with a sponsor called Tap Out. They were doing some big clothing line promotion at Texas Motor Speedway. We had some mutual friends. They introduced us to Cowboy. Cowboy came over to Kevin's bus. We were still sponsored by Budweiser at the time. So it was after qualifying on Saturday, and they were sitting on the back of outside of Kevin's motor coach and just drinking beer. And Cowboy said, "I need some of this NASCAR money. You guys have sponsorships like there's no tomorrow." He's like, "I've got all these small sponsors on my UFC shorts. I need some big sponsors." So we kind of laughed it off then in 2012, and then when they decided to shut the doors. And let me go back to when they shut the doors. When Kevin and Delanna came into Fred in my office back in late 2011, beginning of 2012, and just said, "Hey, after the season, we want to have a family. Can't do both," because they were so dedicated, kind of like you guys are to your race teams. You can't do both. It's a lot of work, and you guys know. I mean, I think you just said a minute ago you babysit the kids sometimes too, so it's a lot of work. So we basically took that and said, "Hey, we'll do this. We'll give us a year to start closing the doors. We want to make sure everybody had jobs." We sold the race teams to a couple different teams. Richard Childress kind of absorbed some of the teams. We had a gentleman come in that won the lottery. I can't remember his name. Bought our truck teams. Joe Dennett bought some of the truck team stuff, and everybody was fine. I think we only had a couple guys that ended up not having jobs. So we closed
took a couple of them.
Yeah.
Our shop foreman today came
So, but we made sure that people had jobs. Made sure the sponsorship went. We brought some sponsorship dollars here too to run after the RCR days. But we did all that, and we did it in a way where Kevin had a vision. And his vision was to don't just shut the doors. Shut the doors over time, make sure everybody has jobs, and do this. That transitioned into this sports marketing company. But Kevin came in my office one day. We were just sitting there just working on his stuff, and he was like, "You think we should get Cowboy?" And I'm like, "For what?" And he was like, "Manage him." He said he was looking for a manager at Texas in November when we talked about it. And I was like, "I mean, I guess we can look into that." And we ended up talking to him, and literally 3 days later, he was like, "I'm in." So it went from one step to the next step. And we went from Cowboy, and he got us hooked up with the UFC female champion, Misha Tate. Misha went into Rose Namajunas, who's a female champion, and it just started doing this. And then we had a relationship with Jason Gore in the PGA Tour, and we called him, and he was still with a management company at the time. But we told him that we had some interest, and then sure enough, like 3 weeks later, he called us, and we went from Jason to the Wells Fargo winner, James Hahn in Charlotte, to another golfer, to another golfer, to another golfer. So it's a ladder. And that's how it is.
So how many athletes do you represent currently?
I think we're at 12.
Okay.
I think we're at 12. And that's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot for the employees we have.
Especially for the size of
it
everything.
Is. And we have all different kinds. We've got a bull rider. We had a motocross kid and rider. He was really good, but we didn't know much about the motocross stuff, and he was getting ready to get to the level where he turned pro. So we passed it on to Ricky Carmichael's group, RC4 management group. So we kind of passed them on. But we're mostly NASCAR and PGA golf. Still have some UFC fighters. Still have a bull rider kid here and there that we're working with, and Nicholas. And but yeah, I love it. I love a challenge.
Do you guys offer, kind of soup to nuts from like the personal side of things to, I would say like, what do they call those places that have like a family office, right? Mm-hmm. Where you kind of do the banking and the investments and all that, all the way to sports marketing.
Yes, we do. That's a great question. We do, but we pass it on. Like we have banks that we can
relationships.
We don't tell people what they have to do.
Yeah.
We give them guidance. Hey, if you'd like to use our people, that's Fred's forte. We pass it on to Fred. Fred gets them hooked up with the right people. We mostly focus on the driver contracts, the sponsorship stuff, managing it, just that kind of stuff. The UFC is a lot different. It takes a lot more in the UFC because there's a lot of contracts. There's a regular contract that you're under, then there's a fight contract, then there's your whereabouts clause for the drug testing. So there's a lot we have to do in the UFC stuff. That's a very hands-on deal. But the NASCAR stuff, I mean, just like you guys have been doing this forever, you could do a lot of this stuff with your eyes closed. So on the racing stuff.
Kelley, I did tell Josh before this is that I'm so interested in the UFC side of the business that it's going to be hard for me not to go and start asking questions because I'm going to have to really discipline myself to keep this focused on what we have him here today, and that's driver representation. So just know that there are lot of things that I'd love to unpack about the difference between UFC contracts and driver contracts. Maybe we'll get there when he does his second interview of all time, when we talk about the business of.
Well, I mean, that's a good question though, because
Good.
what if there's what if there's up and coming drivers that like maybe they excel in another sport? So I mean, that's a good topic in terms of knowing
Jeffrey
the
Earnhardt
differences.
did too.
Well, yeah, I mean that's a good topic in knowing the differences in the various sports. I'm curious just because my background is nothing but racing, motorsports.
It's different. I mean, they're all different, but I'll tell you what, the thing I like about the UFC is everything is so detail oriented. You know what you have to do every single day, every single week you get to the track or get to the fights. You know what goes on. Golf, you don't really know what goes on every week because you don't know if your golfer's playing. They don't have to play every week. You know what I mean? But when you have a contract in the UFC, they give you a schedule and that's what you go by. You don't have to go show up at the hotel. Let's go grab food. They tell you when your break is. They tell you when you have time because you're not really eating in the UFC. You're cutting weight. But my point is, they give you breaks. So
Time for the dryer.
The UFC is very detail oriented. From the day you sign your fight contract, your media is 3 weeks out. You got 2 weeks out. You got to do all your drug testing. You're 1 week out. You show up to this facility. You have to be there at 2 p.m. I mean, it's a regiment.
All these things, though, you did not know the day you and Cowboy are having beers outside of a motorhome. And so when Kevin says let's go rep Cowboy Cerrone, who was great and he's a big fan favorite. Everybody loves Cowboy.
Yep.
What was the acclimation? How did you go learn that? Like at some point you had to go from not knowing how UFC works to UFC how it works and what was that period like? Is it a couple years? Is it what is it?
No, it's getting to become friends with the head of PR, the head of marketing, and listening to them. The guy, his name was Dave back then, and when Dave was there, I'd call Dave and say, "Hey, we're racing in Vegas this weekend. Do you want to come to the race?" And he'd be like, "Yeah, if we're not fighting, I'll come." And sure enough, he came, and I sat in a suite with him for 4 hours and said, "Okay, tell me what I need to do," because Cowboy's going to throw me to the wind. I mean, he's going to throw me and say, "Get in there, buddy," and you get in there. But these guys said, "Hey, here's the deal: you don't want to go in Dana White's room on fight day because that's a no-no. Managers are no. Don't go in there. Okay, you can be wherever you want. When the fighters are up there getting ready to do their stare down, back up. Don't be in the video. Don't be in the video," which I've learned that. And don't try to steal other fighters at fights. That's the biggest thing. And that's just like in the PGA. Don't try to say, "Hey, here's my business card."
For clients.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Same thing in the PGA Tour. PGA Tour, that is a no-no. Like when you're on the PGA Tour and you're sitting in the dining room, the player's dining room, and you're eating and you're hanging out there, you do not go up and try to recruit another golfer. That is a no-no. But in NASCAR,
Do we need some recruitment etiquette in NASCAR?
But in NASCAR, I can walk up to somebody right now and say, "Hey, man, how are you?"
On pit road, you can't do this.
It's a beautiful. NASCAR is a beautiful sport because you can do what you want.
Wow.
Yes.
Who knew that we were in the wild, wild west of all the
right?
sports?
Yeah. Right.
No rules.
Yay for no rules.
we might have built a podcast built off of complaining about the rules every week and all the different restrictions. But the fact is that from a management standpoint, you can go do that. Now, then what is going back to the driver rep? So it's interesting that you guys were doing fighting before you were doing NASCAR. One would make a bet to say that no, of course, Kevin Harvick's company would have gone NASCAR first and then branched out from there. So when did you start taking on driver clients?
Well, Kevin was our first.
Well, yeah, but I'm not counting him.
So Kevin was our first. I would say probably 2016, 2017 is when we started looking at it. The Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is probably the one that comes up first to me because we were going after a couple guys at that point. And the one thing that we do when it comes to like Ricky and stuff, Ricky approached us about, "Hey, can you help me when my stuff's up?" And we were like, "Yeah, whatever you want to do, we'll do that." And we help Ricky. But the crazy part about helping Ricky is how Ricky's deal came about. We literally got him 7 days before he was released from Roush.
Oh, wow.
So you want to talk about getting thrown to the wolves. We got with Ricky. I got him as a client, and I've known Ricky for a long time. He's a good friend of mine. And I was like, "Yep, I'll help you, no problem." And then we got that phone call. Ricky was just in here a couple weeks ago doing his thing. We got that phone call, and I just was like, didn't know what I was walking into, to be honest with you, because I thought we were just having a competition meeting. And Ricky sent me a text like, "You might want to sit in this one." And I don't sit in competition meetings. The drivers do all that stuff. I might be the bad guy behind the scene, with Fred, and we're the bad guys sometimes, but we won't be sitting at the competition meetings. But when that all went down, I was like, okay, this is real. Because Kevin, it never happens with Kevin. I mean, it's a different situation with them, with their sponsorship and what they owed Ricky and all that kind of stuff. But it was one of those deals where, all right, now it's time to show Ricky what we can do. And thank God, lucky enough, it happened and we fixed it.
Yeah, so that's a good question. One of your newest clients happens to drive here with us, Josh Berry. And so how do you go about, you said Ricky came to you. Mm-hmm. I know that there's competition in this sport for representation. How do you go about that? What's the difference? What sets you guys above the rest? Do you want to be in that competition, or you only want to be a certain size?
Yeah, we do want to be a certain size, but racing stuff. I mean, Kevin's retiring, so with Kevin leaving, it is a huge void.
Yeah,
huge void, for a lot of different reasons. So when Kevin decided to hang it up, we knew a year in advance, and he told us, and he said, "Hey, 2023 will be my last year. We won't say anything in 2022 until the time is right." And I said, okay, no problem. We'll figure it out. But then my question to him was, who's going to be the replacement of the 4? Because that's a big deal. I mean, it doesn't matter what ride you're in. This past one, it was who's going to go in the 18. And nobody went in the 18. They kind of took the 18 number and parked it and brought the 54 out, which is perfectly fine. But I asked Kevin, and Kevin, at that point, it was like still too early to decide because we were still a year and a half out. But then over time, we started picking up some more drivers here and there, like Todd Gillen and Harrison Burton, and we picked up some young ones as well. But we were to the point where, okay, these guys are all under contract. They're not available to drive this 4-car. What are we going to do? And Kevin is the kind of guy, when it goes back to this driver development stuff, Kevin likes these young kids or these racers that can race a lot of different stuff, whether it's a late model, whether it's dirt racing. Brent Cruz is a good example. I mean, we heard that kid can race anything and he can win in anything, and that's what Kevin likes to look for, kids that can race a lot of different stuff. If you keep winning at your little short track and that's all you race at, you're good. But until you can go out and drive other cars on dirt, on asphalt, on road courses, that's the difference. But going back to this, Kevin and Rodney, I asked him one day, probably in Daytona, maybe a little before Daytona, it was probably Daytona in July last year. And I said, what are you guys thinking? And Rodney said Josh, and Kevin had already said Josh too. And that's kind of where they went with this. But my mind was like, he's got no money. That's my first thing is right. He drives over there with their sponsors and he does a good job and he wins, but those aren't his sponsors. So I was like, I don't know if this is going to fly, because in the way this world works right now in NASCAR, the first question that these owners or these sales guys and managers are asking is, what does he have? What can he bring to the table? Yep. And I thought about that, and I was like, these sponsors that are on Kevin's car right now are Kevin's sponsors. Not sure they'll want to stick around in that, but over time, SHR came to the equation and said, hey, we'll sign him without sponsors. And we were like, and it was like old school. It was like, you're telling me you want our driver? But it happens every once in a while.
Yeah.
Carson Hocevar.
Happened with Josh for us.
Yes, happened with Josh for you. So when Josh was available, first thing I did was I texted Dale and Kelley, and I said, hey, we would like to talk to Josh about KHI Management. Also, KHI Management representing him and putting him in that 4-car and trying to sell SHR on this. And they were like, we love it. He deserves it. He's won. Yeah, he can do it. So I went and sat with SHR, talked to them, and they were looking at a couple people, but they liked that. And toward the end of last year, I forget which race Josh won last year, but he won a race, and it was basically right when we started talking to SHR, and they were like, okay, we're interested. And then we kind of let the off season kind of fall through and go through, and then the beginning of this year, we picked the talks back up, and it was quick. I mean, it literally happened when we went and saw SHR the second time. It literally happened in like 3 weeks because we had to communicate with you guys to make sure we were good. And I would say that would probably happened around probably the All-Star race this year. It was a little before the All-Star race because Josh was in the 9-car and nothing was done yet. And it kind of got in there. And then he got in the 48, and after that's what it was. He won the All-Star the last chance race, and that was when it was on. They were like, okay, this kid, we want him, and that's fast forward to where we are now, and a couple weeks away from him getting in the 4.